Okay, so hopefully you've started Siemens NX and you're going to be presented with a window that looks like this. So you can see there is a few tutorials on here and a few basic stuff that you can go through as well if you want to in your own time. And by now, hopefully you have installed all of the part files from my Dropbox. So at the bottom of the video down below, you'll see a link to my Dropbox, and hopefully here you'll have the part, a drawing, and a step model. So the differences between this, so obviously the drawing, we should be able to open that up. And here you can see we've got a drawing. Here you have a part file. So a part file is a file that Siemens NX has created. So in here you have lots of data. So model history, all that sort of good stuff, and this is the best option for you. So I created these parts in 2212. So if you're using an NX version older than 2212, then you'll have to use this step model. So the step model is a basic version of the part file basically. It looks the same, it will act the same, but you won't have a lot of the model history that's come along with the part, so you won't be able to see how I've made it. If I've specified something as an M5 hole, you won't know about that. You'll have to rely on the drawing. But when you use part files, you can inspect a part and you'll get a lot of information from there. So if you're using NX 2212 or better, like a more recent version, then always use the part files. If not, use the step models. So I've put mine in a little folder in the beginner to expert course. So let's get a part file open. So we want to go over to the open tab. Parts, part 1, this will be different for you. Oh, load this in. Okay. So now you'll see, you can actually see how I've made this model in here, whereas on the step model you won't see this, it will just come in as a body. Okay, so let's go over a few quick things. So I like to use dark mode. So I'm going to change my layout so it's dark because it's hurting my eyes looking at it. So preferences, user interface, theme. I like dark theme. Okay, that's better. That's like a holiday for my eyes. And I normally change my background, so where we have a light background here, you can right click on the background and you've got a few different options here. I like the dark grey. Okay, that's better for me, but this is just personal preference. Okay, so in this little lesson, we're going to go through how we set up a part file. So now I'm looking at this, and this is, I've opened the model, and now I would start to take time to look at the model and see, try and get a little bit of an idea about how I'm going to manufacture this part. This is what I always do, whether I'm doing something big or something small. I always open the model and I'll spend 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how complex the part is, maybe a bit longer. I normally just have a quick look around. I can see we've got some pockets in here, and if you relate back to the drawing, where is that drawing? If we have a quick look at the drawing, we'll see what we've got important on here. So we've got a 0.1 plus or minus limit on the length, and the same for the width. We've got plus or minus 0.1. So, if you're using any kind of half decent machine tool, you're never going to have to worry about this. And it looks like the most important thing on this part is the hole positions. So you can see they're tied up to plus or minus 0.2. So it looks like they're going to have to be done in one operation, or at least on the same operation, because that way we'll achieve the best tolerances. Also, we can see we have a 15mm thickness, and that's tied up to plus or minus 0.5, so that's something to bear in mind too. But this is really these hole positions are really the only complex thing we're going to be looking at, and then this will player factor for op2. So now we know a little bit more about this part. Start to think about how I want to machine this. So I'm going to hit probably this side first in a vise. So I'm going to machine this side first, and then we'll flip it over and we'll take the back off. Seems like quite a basic way of doing it, to be fair. So obviously this is going to be for a 3-axis machine. So we need to start a manufacturing session now. So let's do that. So the way we do that is we can either go to File, New. So let me just quickly actually describe a couple of different ways you can do manufacturing sessions. So one way of doing it would be I could literally just switch to manufacturing now and go Control-Alt-M or press the button, and this would switch me into a manufacturing environment. So I could set it up here. But the issue with this is because we've got multiple ops, we're going to then end up with our first op and our second op in the same part file. And now when parts start to get a little bit more complicated, so let's say you've got 3 or 4 or 5 operations, you might have fixtures with operations there as well. It starts to really get messy. So what I like to do is I like to separate each part file out as operations. So we're going to have a part 1-op10 or op1, however you like to call it. Personally, I like op10, op20, op30. You could call it op1, op2, op3, so on and so forth. If that's really personal preference, but I like to separate my CAM files out. So I'm going to do that here. So I'm going to do New. Here you can see all of the different types that we've got. So what we are interested in is manufacturing, and we're just going to do a general setup. This is as it looks here. It is general, and this is the one you're going to use most of the time. So what do we want to call this? So I want to call this part_1-10. And you know, it's always good to use capitals if you can. And it's going to go into here. But what I don't want here is I don't want to have all of my files just dropping into this folder. So I'm just going to create a new folder in here, and I'm going to say op10. Because you might end up with fixtures, bolts, you know, anything that's related to op10. And you'll see in later videos how you can really overload a folder, and by splitting them out here, it's going to make it a little bit more user-friendly, and it's just good housekeeping. Okay, so let's create that session. Okay, so now we've got it here. We're in the manufacturing session now, and you can see it's actually split us out here. So we do have part 1, so this is just our part file. And then now we have part_1-op10. So this is going to be where we do our op10 operation. You can tell in later, when we come to do more complicated parts, you're going to have vices, you're going to have, you know, some 5-axis geometry, you're going to have all sorts of stuff in here. You really don't want to overload the part file. This is why it's good to split it out. Okay. So this is the program order view. So in the program order view, this is where all of your toolpaths are going to live, as we've described in a previous video. So NC program is the very top level. So everything lives under here, really. So this is going to be our main program group. So let's just call this. So normally a lot of people just call this like program, like this. But I like to call it the operation name. So I would call this part_1-op10. This is our part name, because when we come to post-process parts, this is the name your file will get. So I like to make this just something a bit more user-friendly. So just quickly explain unused items. So if you're developing a program and you're doing toolpaths, but you know, you've done a toolpath, you're not completely happy with it, but you think it might come in useful at a later date, you can just chuck it into unused, and it lives in there. It doesn't, the main program doesn't read it. It's like a folder just to store some useful information, really. Okay, so we can't obviously just go in and start doing toolpaths now, because we do have to do a little bit of setting up. So our tool tab here, I'm going to leave this empty for now. Yeah, and also we'll make some changes here at a later date. But for now, we don't need to worry about tools because we need to get our geometry set up before we start thinking about tools and what toolpaths we're going to use and stuff like that. So we want to go to our geometry view tab. And you can see here, we just expand this out. We have our MCS mill. So this is our main datum. So I don't really like to call it MCS mill. I would like to call it just MCS. So this is the machine coordinate system. So this is basically where you would like to datum your part as if you were about to set the machine. So in here you can see I can move it around. I've got a few options in here to move it and constrain it. But for now, we're just going to forget about this for the meantime, and we'll come back to setting this in a minute once we get our stock model set up and stuff. So we can see obviously we have our part here. And as a general rule, you never want to work from the main part. So this main part should never change. You should never, I think it's good practice to never make any modifications to this. This should always stay as is, as the designer intended it to be. Because we, as CAM programmers, we would change geometry quite a lot. We would, delete some chamfers, make things bigger, smaller, patch over holes and stuff like that. But we never ever change the main model. So for this example here, what we'll do is we create a linked body. Okay. If we try to do toolpaths on this part, what you'll get is when you start to select faces from the part, you'll end up with, you'll start getting a lot of linked features in here because it's linking its own planes from this master part. And we don't want that. So that's why we create a link body. So you can see here we've got quite a few different tabs up here, and we want to go into the geometry tab. We want to use this wave geometry linker. So what this does, to click it, you have a few options in here. We want to take a body, because this is a body. Oh, here we go. It wouldn't let you select other things. So like I can't select this now because I'm on composite curve. Obviously I can select curves, but not the part itself. So we want body. Okay. So it doesn't look like it's done much, but what we can see in the model tree is now we have this link body here. So as good practice, now you can turn this off and just sort of forget about it. We don't need to worry about that whatsoever now. So we've turned that part off using the little tick box here. You can see, turn that on and off there. So now when it's grayed out, it means this part's off. It's probably a good idea to use your own color schemes. So for example, now we have our link body here. We can go to view or display, edit object display. Now you might want to call this, I don't know, some sort of blue. Go with that. So now we've got a different color. So if we turn our link body off and turn our main part on, you'll see the differences now. Oh. It's just good to know the difference there, and it's always good to just name things how you would expect to, whatever makes sense to you. So to me, this is my main link. This is my main link body. So the reason why it's called a main link body is because this is the body that is directly attached to your master part. Because what we'll end up with in future videos is you'll have a linked body which is just an absolute carbon copy of the design master, and then you'll also end up with other links where we might delete these holes out. We might start creating a bit of geometry for some surfacing. We'll do some splits. We'll do you might delete these pockets for roughing, or so on and so forth. So you'll end up in bigger programs. You'll end up with maybe 3 or 4 of these, maybe. So it's good to name them and keep them all organized. But for a simple part like this, just one is going to be fine. Okay. So now, let's just hide our part so we don't select it by accident. So now our workpiece, as it sort of describes, this is our workpiece part. So let's specify that. So in this box, you've got specify part, which is the part that we're about to machine. You have blank, which is going to be the stock for that part, and we have check. So if for example, we had clamps or areas of this part we wanted to avoid, we could include them here. So currently we have a part and we can select that. Okay. And specify blank. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the bounding block method. So if you use geometry, you could draw a square around this and offset it and make it the size of your block that you want to do. But for us, because we don't have that currently, we're just going to do a bounding block of this part. So this is quite a cool feature really. So you can see it's sort of put a box around the part for us. And we can now say the length is 120, but obviously we're going to want a little bit of stock. So let's say our stock billet is going to be 130. And our Y is going to be 60. And our Z will be a 25. So now you can see how it sort of offset the part. It's give us 5mm stock aside, and now we've got 10mm on the bottom. So it's quite clever and it's quite good actually. But you can see we want to offset this Z position a little bit because obviously we need some stock to clean this top face up when we come to machine it. So I'm happy with it's offset everything else pretty good on the outside, but we just want to change the position here. So let's just say we give ourselves 2mm of stock on the top face. So just enough to clean the block up. You know, you might be working with a sawn edge or so on and so forth. So when we create that, we can see now if we hit this eye, you can see it's got some stuff in here. So you can hit these eyes and you can see we have our part in there. We have our stock block in there. But what's that done? How's it created this block around the part? Well, if we go back to the model tab, so in the part navigator, this is where any features that's been created in this session, this is where this sort of stuff lives in here. So you can see it's created a nice feature group called CAM workpiece. And in there, it's given us a nice bounding block. That's nice. So if you ever want to come here and turn off your block, then you can come into this little tab here and turn it off. It's actually given us this one, but I think we can delete that. I don't think we need this one. Yeah, that's okay. Always good to keep this tree as clean as possible. The amount of programmers that I have seen in the past where this tree has no structure, it's just, you know, pages long and it doesn't mean anything to anybody. It makes it really difficult to go and like for another programmer to pick it up and see what's going on in this tree. So it's always good to name things as, you know, as what probably makes sense to you, or if you're working in a company, you probably come up with some sort of standard name and stuff that everybody knows. So now we have our part and we have our stock selected. And they're in here. So now we can start thinking about setting our MCS. So this is going to be our center for our part, for the probe. So when the probe comes in on the machine and it sets the center of the block, it needs a reference point to CAM to where we've programmed it to. So, I mean, for like 90% of the time, it's pretty standard that we're going to set this part in the center of the block and at the bottom of the block. So how are we going to do that now? So in the specify MCS, we're going to drop down here. And in this drop down, you've got quite a few different options of how we can set this MCS. This is inferred. So inferred sort of takes all of these and it tries to figure out which one we're trying to do. I like this, it's pretty good. I'm just going to select this bottom face and it's going to sort of figure out, it's put it in the center there for us. It's not, you know, it's not exactly correct because we need to flip it around a little bit, but it's picked the center for us, which is nice. Now we can rotate that. If we just go to dynamic, so in dynamic you can drag it about, you can rotate it. So I'm just going to rotate this around 180 degrees. There we go. Now we've got the middle of the part. So we've got our datum. We're happy with that. We're at the bottom of the block. So just quickly explain why I prefer using the bottom block. You get a lot of people that will touch the top and call it +1 mil and then they'll skim to 0. But when you use the bottom of the block, you are a lot safer from the vise. So let's say, for example, we had a vise here. And it's sort of on this sort of line just below the part. if you set 1 mil from the top, but your billet is 5 mil less than what it is in CAM, then when you come down and start doing your roughing paths, you're going to hit the vise. But if you set from the bottom of the block, you'll never be able to hit the vise unless something majorly has gone wrong. Okay, so we've set our MCS. We don't have to worry about much of this. We'll go through these in a later video, but the main thing for this MCS is just going to be to purely set our datum. So we have our datum, we have our workpiece. We'll quickly touch on method groups, but these are the standard ones that come in from CAM. So they're going to be okay. Part stock to 1. So we'll get into that a little bit more when we start to put some toolpaths down. This here is us ready to start doing some toolpaths. So I'll stop the video here for this one because we've gone over quite a lot here on how we set up a CAM session, and on the next video we'll go through bringing tools in and programming our first toolpaths. Right.